Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I will be sharing my thoughts on The Walking Dead Season 8 finale, Wrath. As is the norm, there will be full spoilers throughout this review, so please don't watch any further if that will be an issue. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin. Looking back on the second half of Season 8 of The Walking Dead, I would say that apart from the boring mid-season premiere in which Carl died, and the 11th episode in which Daryl and co spent most of the entry slowly trudging through a swamp, I've enjoyed the other installments despite their flaws. All in all, Season 8B has turned out to be surprisingly decent, and with Wrath I was hoping that the drawn out Negan story arc could end on a high note. Sadly, this episode really disappointed me, with it feeling like a complete anticlimax. In fact, I found myself thinking, really, is that it, once the credits started to roll? The theme of this episode, as it has been for much of the season, was the concept of mercy, with nearly every single character on screen seeming to have some dialogue about there being another way. Admittedly, some of this dialogue did feel natural and kind of moving. Lenny James's Morgan once again put in a great performance, and I genuinely felt for him when he told Rick about how wrong it was for Rick to give his word in the episode previous, only to kill the saviour prisoners anyway. It's been obvious all season how badly the war with Negan has been messing up with Morgan's head, and it's a credit that I can still sympathise with him despite all the people that he has murdered. On the other hand, I found some of the character conversations surrounding Peace just came off feeling incredibly forced, and it seemed like they had only been included just so the narrative could reach the conclusion of Rick sparing Negan, which I'll get to in a minute. For example, I didn't enjoy Rick's conversation with Sadiq at the start. It just felt like such a blatant attempt to shoehorn in Carl's peaceful vision. Almost as if the writers were sat there thinking, shit, we need to make Rick change his mind to let Negan live. I know, let's have Sadiq talk about Carl. I mean, when Sadiq says to Rick that ideas are all that's left of the dead, it's almost as if he was writing out the words "forgive Negan, it's what your son would have wanted" in huge bold letters on the floor. I don't know, maybe I'm being too picky, but at this point it felt to me like even a blind Gabriel could already see the outcome to Rick and Negan's final confrontation. And whilst I'm on that topic, well, I might as well talk about it. Now, for what it's worth, I like the All Out War comic arc. It's not the best storyline from The Walking Dead, but it is an exciting read. Looking on the internet during the past few weeks, I've come to notice that there are a lot of complaints about the nature of how the war ended, specifically aimed at the final coming together of Rick and Negan. Essentially, what happens in the comics involves the Saviours arriving at the hilltop for one final assault, only for Rick to then emerge and step outside the hilltop's gates to talk to Negan about working together. Negan then out of nowhere then has an epiphany and seriously contemplates this idea. Whilst he is standing around thinking, Rick takes a bit of a cheap shot and slashes his throat, only to then get the hilltop doctor to come and save him. There are a few other differences as well, but don't worry, I'm going to talk about them in a minute. So from what I can see, the complaints around this scene stem from the fact that a lot of critics believe that Kirkman really didn't know how to end the war. I mean, I like this moment in the comics, but even I can see that it does seem a bit weird for Negan to stop in his tracks just because Rick suggests they team up, especially after all the crap that has happened beforehand. The show, it seems, has tried to combat this by having Rick plead to Negan to talk to him for 10 seconds during their come together, and instead of directly talking about pooling their resources together as he does in the comics, he instead talks about Carl. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Negan stops as bizarrely as he does in the comics, also whilst portraying a facial expression that makes him look like he's really constipated, before then having his throat slashed by Rick. It was just weird. I get why the comic version gets criticised, but honestly I think I prefer it. I mean, why does Negan just get so emotional out of nowhere and allow Rick to nearly kill him? I get that Negan liked Carl, but that doesn't stop the fact that he did try to kill him already, let's remember, at the end of Season 7. And I really don't think that due to his death being mentioned, he would come to a sudden stop when being face to face with the man he wanted to kill for so long. Maybe there's something I'm missing here, but with all the talk from Gimple earlier this year about the need to kill Carl to cause Rick to forgive Negan, it seems he also killed Carl just to try and explain the problematic moment in which Negan stands motionless and gets his throat sliced. But the thing is, killing Carl doesn't immediately solve all your narrative problems. I'm sorry, but I'm just not buying that Negan would get so upset to the point of freezing in front of Rick due to hearing Carl's name being mentioned. I mean, he spent a couple of hours with him at best, and he's making it out like Rick had just mentioned his wife Lucille. In fact, you know what, I think if Rick had said something to Negan along the lines of, "Hey, I know why you're so attached to that damn bat. Lucille, that was her name, wasn't it? But look around you, Negan, you've lost. All your men are surrounded. Is this what she would have wanted? You kill me now and it's over for you. But if you join me, we can work together and we can rebuild." Now, I came up with that in about a minute, but I honestly believe that something like this would have made more sense. As it turns out, Negan's hesitation on a TV show seems just as ridiculous to me as it does in the comics. Speaking of ridiculous, whilst I will be in agreement in saying that seeing Negan in the comics rise from the floor with a slashed throat to then break Rick's leg is a bit dumb, I feel that what comes next as a result of this is iconic. With Rick's leg messed up bad and Negan bleeding out, the Hilltop Doctor, as expected, rushes out to aid Rick instead of Negan. Rick then screams to the Doctor to help Negan instead of him, with the Doctor explaining that if he doesn't treat Rick and set his leg immediately, it may never fix itself. Even knowing this, Rick still tells the Doctor to save Negan's life, essentially sacrificing his ability to walk unaided to save the man who killed Glenn. I love this moment in the comics. The panel in which Rick screams "You save his life" when he's lying there with his leg mangled has so much raw emotion flowing off the page. TV Rick on the other hand just walks away from a bleeding Negan and says save his life with all the emotion of a wet paper towel. I think they changed this scene from the comics because in said comics Rick takes more of a backseat role due to his injury after the war ends. I'm guessing the showrunners don't have the balls to have Rick be a cripple and not do as much due to the fact that Andrew Lincoln helps draw a lot of the audience to the show. And with the dwindling viewing figures of late, the last thing they can afford to do is have people switch off because they aren't seeing enough Rick. However, Rick's injury in the comics is the price he pays for arguably doing the right thing. He could have easily let Negan die, have his leg fixed, and live out his life, but instead he saved Negan even knowing this. It made his choice to save Negan all the more affecting and resulted in this particular sequence being much more special. The TV show messed up big time by changing this in my opinion, and as a fan of the show and the comic, this turned out being a pretty lousy interpretation of the final fight. If Negan hesitating wasn't weird enough, I also found the concept of him sacrificing his own people to make Rick think he was on the right track to be just as odd a creative decision. How many times have we heard Negan talk about people being a resource this season, and yet here he is willing to put them in the firing line to take down Rick, who in the end he doesn't even take down anyway. I'll admit it was a clever play, but it felt very out of character. I know he said to Gabe that he wouldn't normally do this kind of thing, but that doesn't mean I'm just going to let it slide just because of this one line. Eugene was another character who seemingly did something that didn't seem in line with his motivations of late, but his decision to sabotage the Saviour's guns did make more sense. I'll happily hold my hands up and say that I got this one wrong. I truly thought that Eugene was Team Negan, but he pulled through for Rick in the end. I have to say he's a very good actor because he really had me fooled last week into thinking that he wanted to work his arse off to supply the Saviours with working bullets. I'm glad to see him get some form of redemption, and it will be interesting to see where he goes from here. Before I mention a few other things that I did like from this episode, there's a few more problems I have to get off my chest. Firstly, seeing Oceanside turn up in just a nick of time with makeshift Molotov cocktails was so cringeworthy. I really hated this moment. It just came off as feeling so cheesy. In addition, they were in the scene for all of about 10 seconds, so all the build up we've seen just to get them on board for the war narrative was essentially just for that one little scene. What was the point? Secondly, I don't know what is with the Legion of Evil meeting, in which Maggie, Daryl and Jesus sat in a dimly lit room, seemingly making plans to make Rick see whatever that means, like some B-list Batman villains. I mean, what was that about? Please someone tell me. And why on earth was Jesus there? He's been a pacifist all season and now he's turning to the dark side because reasons. I don't get it. I hope next season the writers just ignore this and act like it didn't happen at all. So what else did I like about this episode? Well, despite my moaning about the Negan and Rick showdown, I did like the fact that both characters looked lethargic and completely out of energy during their ruckus. They were both on their last legs, and I liked the fact that the fight didn't drag on like some of their previous encounters. In addition, I also like the little nod to the Whisperers with their boundary markings being made visible, which hopefully means they are coming next season. Furthermore, the fact that Dwight also got some kind of closure even if Sherry is still missing pleases me. I still think Daryl was a bit of a dick in telling him not to come back, but after all Dwight's been through, I believe he deserves the chance to try and find his estranged wife and be happy. I just hope this doesn't mean he will be gone now for good. And finally, Jadis and Alden have both been likeable of late and it looks like they will be sticking around, which is a good thing in my opinion. Overall though, it's pretty obvious that this episode wasn't a favourite of mine, and compared to how much I've liked the rest of Season 8B, I really expected better things from this conclusion. I came out of this episode just feeling kind of relieved that the whole thing was over. I wasn't sad or upset that this season was coming to an end, instead I'm glad The Walking Dead can move on and start afresh later this year. Season 8 has shown that The Walking Dead can still get it right when it tries. There's been some really good episodes this season which does fill me with optimism for the future, but unfortunately I can't say that this was one of them. So there you have it, the last review for Season 8 of The Walking Dead. Please let me know your comments below. I will be trying to put out my review of the Fear premiere at some point tomorrow after I watch it, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Anyway, a big thank you for watching all my videos this season, and as always, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.